Tell us a little bit about what you saw and being able to relay that message to Cora when you watched Kimbrel pitch and kind of help out so he wasn't tipping his pitches.
So tipping pitches, we hear about it all the time.
People at home understand what tipping pitches is all about.
It's amazing.
And that's remarkable.
Alex, I have some boots on the ground reporting to kick this podcast off for you.
Yes, let's go.
I was in the streets. I was with the people this past weekend.
Yep.
I was out in Trenton, New Jersey.
Looking through Zoran Mamdani's college applications. Yes.
Right. I just recently took a hacking 101 class. No, I was in the streets in Trenton, New Jersey at a Trenton Thunder ball game. Now, the Trenton Thunder used to be the Yankees AA affiliate, but the Yankees so rudely dropped them as part of the minor league restructuring that Rob Manfred was so keen on doing just a few years back. But since then, the Trenton Thunder struck a deal to be part of the MLB Draft League. So they are still associated with Major League Baseball. They get prospects in who have just recently finished college and declared for the draft, or maybe in some cases, I guess, just recently finished high school and declared for the draft, and they need some games to play, but they're not officially in an organization yet. Now, I will say it's not the best baseball that I've ever seen in my life, but that's not what I'm here to report for you. I'm not here to scout the players in the MLB Draft League. I'm here to scout something else. The culture around the MLB Draft League.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So, you know, we've talked a lot on the podcast about how stadiums now basically are like DJ sets in between pitches, and they're just like dropping sound bites and little songs and whatnot. You know, I would say broadly, the vibe of the Trenton Thunder Stadium between pitches was like recession era pop, you know, like 2010.
Nice. Yes.
A lot of like, I guess Teo Cruz is post 2010, you know, but like that kind of energy was really spread throughout the ballpark. But there was one song that I felt it was really important for me not to text you about and to wait to tell you live on the podcast. They dropped not once, not twice, 3 times during this ball game. They dropped the guitar lick from Never Meant by American Football.
What? Under what scenario?
Just like,
was it like
between pitches, brother. I was like, what is happening right now?
What depressed 30-something-year-old is on the keys right now?
Well, I was kind of like in my head, I know American Football is not from New Jersey, but it is kind of New Jersey culture to drop a Midwest emo song between pitches at a baseball game.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. But it was just the guitar lick. It was not like the whole song. It was just
Yeah. Yep. They didn't even get to the lyrics. They didn't even let it play long enough to get to the lyrics.
That's fair, honestly, maybe.
I was impressed.
Yeah, someone on the Trenton Thunder knows ball.
Someone on the Trenton Thunder in-game entertainment team may listen to this podcast. It's a non-zero chance that if you're the type of person who's queuing up Never Meant by American Football at a formerly minor league, now MLB Draft League team in the in-game entertainment, that you at home understand what tipping pitches is all about.
Look, I think we can do better. I think we can keep pushing. We can keep the pressure on teams. Never Meant is a great entry.
Okay.
Into this space. Who's going to be the first team to needle drop a Hotelier song at a minor league ballpark?
It's the bottom of the third, you know, they're making a pitching change all of a sudden. Though I seem cool, calm, and collected.
Yeah, there you go. Bullying works.
That's my report to you from the homeland. From the heartland, the homeland, Trenton, New Jersey. That's my report to you and the listeners, my dispatch.
Right. The diners of baseball, you know?
Yeah.
The MLB Draft League ballparks.
Okay, we have an uncommonly packed episode of Tipping Pitches on the slate today. The Nationals debuted a new jersey patch. We're going to slot that into our evil jersey patch rankings. Hopefully,
love that
Alex,
that's what you let it. We have a super packed episode first on our agenda.
I mean, people demand to hear the update.
They do.
Where do the Nationals fit in amongst the most evil jersey patches? People demand. Rob Manfred decided he was going to go rogue and start talking about how many billions of dollars the players will cost themselves. Speaking of billions of dollars, the A's are still trying to get funding for their new stadium. And speaking of Las Vegas, there's a betting scandal. Also, MLB and ESPN apparently re-engaging. We're going to talk about all of that and maybe the Dodgers getting themselves caught up in a federal investigation. Jeez. Oh Lord. But before we do, I am Bobby Wagner.
I am Alex Paisley.
And you are listening to Tipping Pitches. Thank you to this week's new patrons, Dave, Devin. Oh, it's just Dave and Devin. You know, my cadence would have had
Dave
you
and
believe
Dev.
there was another one, but I was reading the emails wrong. So it's just Dave and Devin. Thanks,
Just
Dave and
keeping
Devin.
us on our toes here.
So did you not want to start with the Nationals jersey patch? You made it seem like
No,
that
we
wasn't
can't. No, we
A1
can't.
story, but that's the A1
It
story.
isn't.
Come on.
It is. That's the above the fold story for us here at Tipping
No,
Pitches.
exactly. AARP, formerly the American Association of Retired Persons, I'm reading from Wikipedia now, not sure if you've heard of it, is an interest group in the United States focusing on issues affecting those 50 and older. The organization, which is headquartered in Washington, D.C., said it had more than 38 million members as of 2018. I bet you that number is higher now. Alex, they're going to be the official jersey sponsor of your Washington Nationals. Man, this is exciting. You know, I forgot that the Nationals were one of the teams that didn't even have a jersey patch.
I know.
They really held on as long as possible.
Well, you know, it's a little like Goldilocks, right? You're waiting for the right partner to come along. You don't jump at the first opportunity. You hold out a little bit. Not everything needs a reaction.
Like Goldilocks. That's exactly what I was thinking.
I know, exactly.
Okay, so now they are the 26th team to add a jersey patch. The 4 remaining holdouts, Alex, we're holding out for a better deal, better Goldilocks deal, as you would put it, are the Chicago White Sox, the Minnesota Twins, the Tampa Bay Rays, and the Colorado Rockies. They're just like, we don't need the money. We don't need better players. We don't need anything. We're just doing our own thing over here. Those are the 4 teams. The Nationals rounding out the NL East by adding AARP.
I think it's great when a team actually brings in branding that like feels like it relates in some way to their constituency, to their environment. In the Nationals' case, picking an organization that represents the interests of, frankly, most of their fan base, which is U.S. congressional representatives.
I agree. I will say, you know, as much as we've made hay here on the podcast about the different jersey patch sponsors, for the most part, they are in some way at least kind of related to the team and area that they come from.
Yeah.
Whether or not that actually means that they're for the consumer or not is a different story. In a lot of cases, the answer is no. But like, you know, you look at Houston and what do you think about Texas? You think oil.
I think oil.
Exactly.
That's it.
So Occidental, a petroleum company, actually makes a lot of sense for the Astros. You know, for those of you listening who are confused by what's happening right now, maybe you're a new listener. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. A year and a half ago, we decided to rank the jersey sponsors based on how evil they are. So Alex has just had some bad coffee. Maybe some grinds at the end of this cup.
Got a little grounds. It's fine.
It's not what you want. So starting at the bottom, we chose the least evil. So the best.
Correct.
And then all the way at the top, the number 1 ranking was the most evil. The worst company was at the top. it was a very fun episode. I will link it in the description to this podcast. It's, I think, truly one of our most scholarly efforts, and one of the episodes that I am most proud to be a part of here at Tipping Pitches Industries. And ever since then, when teams have added a jersey patch, like for example, the Pittsburgh Pirates added sheets, the Cubs signed on to Motorola. I think another one was the Orioles joined up forces with T. Rowe Price, whatever that is. The Mariners inked a deal with Nintendo. We've added them onto this list, so it's become a running list of how evil the jersey patches are. And now we got another one, AARP. What do you think? What are your first thoughts about the artist formerly known as the American Association of Retired People? I guess they've just dropped the acronym and they're just AARP sans acronym. I never understand when a company does that, because it's like, we know that that's what it used to stand for. So it's just still going to be that.
You can't say it doesn't stand for anything anymore, right? Because if you stand for nothing, then you fall.
2 roads.
Jesus, no.
And then you carried me down the one, so there was only one set of footprints.
First impressions, I mean, I feel like this is going to end up near the bottom of the list, right? Like,
right. Which is to say, the top in morality.
Exactly. I've wrapped my head around it. Finally, a year and a half in. I mean, just a little refresher. We maybe don't have to run through the whole list.
No, I think you should run through the list.
All right, fine. Let's run through the list. Let's do it real quick. Let's start from the bottom, which is to say, once again, the least evil, most moral jersey patch sponsor. That is the New York Mets with New York Presbyterian Hospital, the Mariners, and Nintendo, Detroit Tigers, and Meyer, Kansas City Royals with Quick Trip, both the Padres and the Chicago Cubs, and Motorola. Pirates with Sheets, Arizona Diamondbacks with Avnet, Los Angeles Angels and FBM. That's
Foundation Building Materials.
For the uninitiated, for those not in the know. The A's and the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority.
It's so funny that we put them above like 10 other things.
I know.
It's just a tourist agency. They don't actually even do anything. We were so mad about the whole Vegas move and casinos in general that we were like, fuck it. They're more evil than FBM. I don't care.
Exactly.
They're right behind a bank and a home security system.
Well, I mean, like, to be clear, they are mostly built off of just convincing people to come gamble in Las Vegas, right? Like, I don't think they're necessarily in the clear.
I mean, no conscious consumerism under capitalism.
That's right, brother. Coming in at 15, Toronto Blue Jays and TD Bank, Miami Marlins and ADT, Boston Red Sox with Mass Mutual, the Milwaukee Brewers with Northwestern Mutual. Big difference there, and I know what it is. Baltimore Orioles with T. Rowe Price, San Francisco Giants, and Chevrolet. We're on the top 10 now. New York Yankees.
Clap it up, Chevy. Let's go. Clap it up.
New York Yankees with Star Insurance, the Atlanta Braves with Quick Crete, Cincinnati Reds, and Kroger. That is
my
following
greatest
a re-ranking.
My greatest accomplishment is getting those up the list.
A little historical revisionism that occurred in this list with regards to Kroger. Philadelphia Phillies and Independence Blue Cross into the top 5 now. The Los Angeles Dodgers and Guggenheim, likely thing for them to choose. St. Louis Cardinals and Stifle, Cleveland Guardians, and Marathon, the Texas Rangers with the Energy Transfer, and coming in at number 1, your Houston Astros and Oxy. That is to say, Occidental Petroleum. The GOATs, the greatest to ever do it.
You really got to be a special company to outflank the Dakota Access Pipeline people at number 2. That's tough.
Yeah.
Nice work, boys.
Tough to change your name to Oxy and have your image improve.
Uh-huh. Okay. AARP.
All right.
Let's slot him in.
AARP. Can I just say my gut reaction, my gut thinking is coming in at 24. That is to say, the second least evil company on this list.
Slightly more evil than New York Presbyterian Hospital, but less evil than Nintendo. That's what you think.
That's my starting point. My starting negotiation point. I'm willing to hear otherwise. But as we said, look, I'm not super familiar with AARP. I have not had to leverage their services thus far. I think I may one day.
Well, maybe not, honestly.
Well, the sense that I get is they maybe do provide some sort of net good to folks over the age of 50. They lobby for health and social service issues around Medicaid and Social Security. They fight for community healthcare services. They are a nonprofit, which, look, don't get me wrong, you're not going to find me pouring love on the nonprofit industrial complex. But as it compares to Star Insurance, I think there's a bit of a difference. What's your thinking on this?
So I think I agree. I think you nailed it. I think AARP is a symptom of an ailing society, that they are a nonprofit that has to fill in the gaps of a lot of, frankly, companies that are much higher than where we're going to slot them on this list, which is insurance companies, broad failures under capitalism, that we need dedicated advocates for the elderly in this country. But honestly, the elderly community is where a lot of the most present fight for like progressive legislation is. So they, and AARP like lobbied for some of the legislation to protect senior citizens in this country, which I think is a good thing. If you go down to criticism, it's a lot of Republican senators who are mad at them over the years, which I think is a nice guiding light. Chuck Grassley said that in 2008 they weren't doing a good enough job. I'm like, well, Chuck Grassley, I don't think you really have much of a leg to be standing on here. I'm sure they are. To be fair,
he'd probably already been using their services for like 25 years, so he knows them intimately.
They advocate for things like, obviously, what you mentioned, healthcare, Medicare, lowering prescription drug costs, things of this nature. Now, as with all, I think, nonprofits or organizations that get above a certain size, there is sort of a conflict of interest between the more commercial wing of a company that's trying to get the memo out about membership and trying to do marketing, and then the side of the company that is trying, or organization or whatever you want to call it, that is trying to do the original mission work. I think that's kind of splitting hairs between what we've talked about with some of the other companies on this list. So that being said, I feel pretty good about it. I'm sort of a toss-up as to whether or not they're more or less evil than Nintendo. That feels like comparing apples and oranges. They're doing entirely different things. Nintendo is like entertainment, which I think at its core is cooler than what AARP is doing, but maybe less essential to society. So it feels right that sort of the original mission part of healthcare and advocacy in the medical community make up the two least evil slots on our list. That's my take.
I think that's a great take. I love when we are aligned, which has not been the case on every decision here.
No, it hasn't. I would like to reiterate to the listeners at home.
I'd rather you didn't, but
okay, fine. I'll just say I think Chevy's done a lot for this country. Do we need to consider whether or not they are less evil than New York Presbyterian Hospital? Might they take the top spot away from my New York Mets?
I mean, I think it's worth considering.
Okay. Let's hear it. Let's hear some thoughts. New York Presbyterian Hospital, a commercial chain of hospitals, kind of unsavory concept. Then then again, they are actually literally saving thousands of lives every year.
Yeah.
AARP is theoretically saving or extending the lives of millions every year. I don't know. How does that math square up? It's tough. Are we using advanced statistics or are we using counting stats?
I don't know. I know I said it was worth considering. I still think I fall down on the side of hospitals maybe providing slightly more essential work, even if some of their practices are predatory or bureaucratic. There is a very clear net good associated, I think, with hospitals. I think it's good for a functioning society to have.
Statement.
I know. Well, yeah. in this day and age, it is.
All right. I just wanted to have the conversation. I felt that it's due diligence to consider all perspectives.
Well, and this is why we keep you around, right? You are nothing if not committed to the marketplace of ideas.
I know. I live in there. I see the, I kind of play 3D chess in the marketplace of ideas. Many people have said that.
You've got a stall in the marketplace.
Stall. We booked a table in the marketplace of ideas and we're selling our wares. Okay. Nicely done. AARP. Congratulations. You are now the 24th least evil jersey patch in Major League Baseball. Congrats to the Washington Nationals organization. Nice work. You didn't fuck it up too bad. You could have done a lot worse.
Thank you. That's how I go about my life, frankly.
Could have done
a lot worse.
Yeah. Okay. Which direction do you want to go in next? Let me remind you the list of topics that we can talk about today if you'd like to, but we don't have to because it's our podcast. Rob Manfred just getting up in front of the media and wanting to chat labor. Who can't relate? John Fisher just talking about how much money his new ballpark is going to cost and how he's not really sure if he has it. Tale as old as time. MLB and ESPN renewing talks. Luis Ortiz being put on the inactive list while being investigated for gambling. That's pretty much it. I kind of don't really want to talk about the Dodgers federal investigation story because it just starts from such a bad faith place, and I almost don't even want to acknowledge it. We've spent plenty of time over the last couple of weeks talking about the Dodgers and their organization's involvement or lack of involvement or lack of advocacy as it pertains to ICE's operations in Los Angeles. I don't know. Until it becomes something tangible and real, I don't think it's worth talking about, frankly.
Right. Well, I mean, this is Stephen Miller's legal firm that he started a couple years ago. That's whole purpose just exists to volume shoot down rights of folks.
Mm-hmm. Cool thing.
The Dodgers are but one of hundreds of targets of them. So I tend to agree with you that I think it's not worth going over on this here episode. I think we should start with Manfred.
Okay, great.
Because he has been reticent to discuss in much detail whatsoever the state of labor, as it were, in baseball ahead of the upcoming collective
state of labor, you say?
Real ones know.
Ahead of the I think that's Michael Bauman's music.
CBA negotiations coming up at the end of next year. And yeah, he's been pretty mum as far as where things stand on the negotiation landscape. Obviously, Tony Clark has been a little more vocal about what he sees as being the issues.
Kinda. Not really, for being honest.
Not correct, yes. And I don't really think he has any reason to be super vocal about it right now, right? I mean, this early on in the process, I think you probably don't want to show your hand anyway. I think what he has said that has stood out that we've talked about, right, is that there is likely going to be a lockout, right? Like all indications point to, and Manfred has alluded to this as well by saying lockouts are essentially the norm in professional sports during the off season, which that's interesting because norms are created by someone usually. They don't just appear. But yeah, he was at a conference in Atlanta, I think.
Dude,
like
there
this
is
past
no
week.
shortages of these conferences that he's always just at speaking.
Yeah.
Where do these conferences come from? They just
I don't. Where's our
spring
invite?
up out of thin air. Yeah, no, exactly.
Seriously.
We are talking about all the same things that Rob Manfred is talking about. There is no reason that he should be at a conference and we should not be.
Correct. Exactly. Yeah. So it was an investor event held by the Atlanta Braves, and he got just sure. He got unusually candid about the league's strategy when it comes to negotiations and sort of what his plan is as far as talking to players and trying to convince them that changes need to be made to the financial landscape. He talked about some of the talking points that he's bringing up, how he's trying to convince the players how much money they are supposedly leaving on the table. And while I think some of his comments were a little farcical, it was still interesting to get some insight into how he is thinking about these things ahead of the looming CBA fight. What were kind of some of your takeaways, or was there anything that sort of jumped out to you that he talked about?
He's trying to soft launch the salary cap. He's trying to incept the salary cap into players' thinking. A lot of the quotes from Manfred are about the slower growth of MLB players' salaries. Basically, his broad thesis is that MLB players are leaving money on the table compared to other sports. And what's the difference between Major League Baseball and the other North American professional sports leagues, major North American professional sports leagues, is they have a cap because they also have a revenue sharing split, a defined revenue sharing split, which Major League Baseball has not and never has had, which Major League Baseball has never had. The Major League Baseball Players Association is staunchly against this. This was a foundational principle to Marvin Miller's early work with the Major League Baseball Players Association. Keep it a free market, and that way we can bargain for as much of this pie as we are strong enough to get. Now, over the last few decades, I think macroeconomic headwinds, honestly, like the globalization of the market and capitalism, has helped the owners at a faster rate than it has helped the players. And so the revenue coming into Major League Baseball and all professional sports has outpaced the share of the revenue that the players have been able to negotiate for, because they are still negotiating from a baseline of hard numbers, not a percentage of the revenue pie like other sports have. So you've seen the rapid ascension of, for example, let's take the NBA, for example, of salaries in the NBA have doubled in the last 10 years, more or less, for the top earning players. Now, I think one of the criticisms of what Manfred has said here is that he's conveniently leaving out kind of like the mid-market type players in these other leagues, the lowest paid players in these other leagues, and whether or not the baseball model with 26 players on a roster can ever even be financially, economically comparable to something like the National Basketball Association, which he is clearly alluding to so much in a lot of the concepts that he's talking about here. It's not like baseball doesn't have higher total dollar value contracts that are still being signed. It's not like baseball doesn't have longer guarantees. It's not like baseball doesn't have still, when you compare it to something like the NFL, which roster size is more comparable to baseball than in basketball to baseball. It's not like baseball's guarantees do not far outpace the National Football League. So he's warping this narrative pretty aggressively. But I think beyond all of this, the thing that pisses me off the most reading this article is that for all intents and purposes, he is essentially bargaining right here. Mm-hmm. He is talking through a team investor conference, the Braves team investor conference. So in his official capacity as Major League Baseball commissioner to something that is being sanctioned by one of the 30 teams. So it's not like he's at just like a business conference opining about what's happened to baseball for the last 30 years. This is literally through the official channels of the commissioner's office. He is talking to the players through quotes that he knows will be reported on by many media members because they are of interest to the baseball watching community and the baseball business community. So, I mean, I know we don't care about anything like this anymore, but this is actually an unfair labor practice. Like, you can't bargain outside of the confines of actually bargaining with the union officials who have been elected democratically to represent the union. That's actually illegal. I know we don't care about laws anymore, but you actually can't do that. But it's in a gray enough area that like they're probably not going to file a ULP about this. And even if they did, I mean, not to depress everybody, but hey, we don't have a Department of Labor anymore. So we don't have a National Labor Relations Board that's funded enough to handle, the thousands and thousands of Starbucks ULPs that happen every hour, it seems like, let alone something for the MLBPA, one of the strongest and highest paid unions in America.
Yeah, he's really threading the needle here by saying our strategy is to say X, Y, and Z things that we're going to say during bargaining and negotiation anyway, right? It's like, and what he is doing, and to Tony Clark's credit, he calls us out, right, is he's trying to drive a wedge between the players and basically saying the top 10% of the league is getting, I think, 78% of the revenues or something like that. It's a little unclear how they came to the numbers exactly. But he's coming out and saying, we think that the rank and file player has a different vested interest than leadership, and leadership is not, representing them or appealing to them in the way that they should. And so, it's on us as the league to really show that the wool has been pulled over their eyes.
Yeah, this is all part of his sort of broader mission to bring everyone closer together post the last lockout, which there was a lot of animosity. And now he says he's been meeting with all 30 teams, which is something that he never did in the interim period between CBAs before this past one. It's like, all right, all right, bro.
He also talks about free agency as well, and the desire to maybe put a deadline on free agency to he's like really concerned with the fact that, free agency drags on for months. Oftentimes there's a really slow period in the winter, and, February rolls around and there are still guys who aren't signed. He's right. That objectively does happen. I think he has a direct line to the 30 people who make it that way. I think it is oftentimes not players who are necessarily holding out. It is owners who are holding out and saying, hey, Jordan Montgomery, you don't have any other suitors. So you can sign with us now, or you can sign with us at the end of March and be behind on, on your prep for the season or whatever. The other interesting thing that he talks about is the Economic Reform Committee, right? Which is
sort of like a subplot of his little rant.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of buried deep in the Athletic article on this, but I did think it's interesting, right? Because this committee is formed after the last lockout. It was a little unclear sort of what the purpose was. I think it was rumored that, they are going to be the ones who are maybe devising a plan for salary cap or this, that, whatever. And he comes out and says that it's been purposefully mysterious. Quote, purposefully mysterious in the sense that not everyone needs to know exactly what you're doing all the time. But really the focus of that committee from day one was franchise values. Where are we? Why are we where we are? And what can we do to fix our situation?
I always ask myself those three questions.
I'm always saying, why are we where we are?
You forgot, where are we? I mean,
Where-
in order to figure out why are we where we are, you gotta, I mean, I would argue the first step is, where are we?
Right. And then where
Don't
are
get
you?
too far ahead of yourself, though. Yeah, no.
And I'm
What-
so sorry. Look, I'm glad that someone is focusing on franchise values, because I think that's something that is not talked about enough, is that franchise values could be higher. And I feel very confident that that committee is, that the conversation around franchise values directly relates to health of the league and the sport. I'm sure of it. That's their number one priority. It is not simply, how do we ratchet up the value of our franchises using things like, say, a salary cap.
Man, yes, that is 1000% true. I find the obsession with franchise values, which for the most part is made up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, these are made up. Franchise values are, that's just exactly what they are. They're valuations. It's what will someone pay for them. This is a market, right? So a market dictates, according to their fucking logic or whatever, at Adam Smith. We're going real Adam Smith hours. Like, if someone will pay for it, then that's what it's worth.
Yeah.
So they all talk about the franchise valuations, which are like more or less rigged because they are allowed to practice monopolistic. They're allowed to use monopolistic practices to raise their franchise values artificially. They are allowed to take investment from the same Wall Street banks that are part of the valuation process of many of these franchises as they are putting themselves on the market for future sales or hypothetical sales. It's a lot of nonsense. But one of the things that the Braves chairman says at the bottom here is that many MLB franchise values look more like 4 or 5 times their expected annual revenues. And some of them are going down from that multiple, while NBA teams look more like 10 or 11 times their expected annual revenue. To that I say, are we sure that the NBA is not drastically overvalued at this moment?
Right. Don't leave out my favorite part of his quote, where he says, there's 9 teams that are at a 5 multiple or less. Rob can fix that.
Rob, get to work,
yes,
bro.
He can.
yes, si se puede, Rob. I just don't care. I mean, like, why do they think people care about this? Why do they think this is anyone's problem except an owner who actively wants to sell their team? This is not a problem that the league has to worry about. The league should be worried about fan engagement. The league should be worried about developing new groups of fans, reaching people where they are, reaching new groups of fans who have never been catered to in any meaningful way before. That is what, honestly, with the work that the league should be doing. And this other stuff, in theory, if we're supposed to believe, which obviously I know that this is not real, but if we're supposed to believe anything they say about any of this stuff, franchise valuations should rise along with that. Those should be correlated. But they're obviously not. These are like financial little gimmicks that they're playing with their friends who work on Wall Street. And I just struggle to see why we should be comparing MLB teams to the NBA. It's a different thing. And what I struggle with more beyond that is why we should take what Rob Manfred is saying as anything other than just manipulation of a future labor deal, especially given the time that he decided to come out and start being transparent about this. I mean, Rob is a pretty shrewd political operator when it comes to these corners of the world. He knows that 1 year ago there was seemingly a coup within the Major League Baseball Players Association. He knows that the MLBPA and the NFLPA are currently being investigated for potential fraud or whatever that's actually being considered illegal use of their position as union leadership. So he sees all of these sort of death by 1,000 cuts things stacking up, and he knows that the players were not quite aligned during the last CBA, as evidenced by the fact that the executive council voted no on the deal and the 30 team representatives all voted yes unanimously. They were at odds with each other. When you see stuff like that, I think Manfred, like you're talking about, sees a wedge that already exists and is trying to exploit it. And I hate to point all of that stuff out in context with what Manfred is saying, because I know that what he's doing is bad faith. But at a certain point, perception about union leadership does become reality among players, because the players are too big of a group to really all have like a one-on-one solidarity foundation with union leadership. They are operating as enough of a commercial business on the MLBPA side. And I get it, that like these perceptions about whether or not union leadership is actually doing the right thing, I think it would be silly for us to say that those don't exist. Because clearly, and we've seen enough in the last couple of years, it's not like every single player and every single person has come out being like, we're doing great, we're crushing it. Now, I've criticized players in the past for saying dumb stuff, like Adam Wainwright coming out and saying, if we would have just signed the same deal, we would be happy to go out there and play. That's his fault. In many of these cases, individual cases, it's the player's fault for not educating themselves better about what you have to do to continue to move the ball forward. But even still, you are only as strong. This is like a weak link situation. Your chain, your solidarity, your fight for your next CBA is only as strong as the weakest person who's willing to come out and side on the MLB side, to listen to what Rob is saying here and actually start to believe it. Because it falls apart very quickly, honestly. If you have even 10, 15% of players being like, maybe he is right. Maybe we have left $2 billion on the table. Maybe if we would have signed this deal 10 years ago, we'd be better off.
Yeah, I mean, this is where, when we talk about how the labor landscape in baseball is the exact same labor landscape that exists, on the factory floor or whatever, with a few zeros at the end, obviously. This is what we're talking about. This is where it's laid bare. You pit the two sides against each other. The 90% of workers versus the 10% of the highest earners or whatever, and say, hey, look, that guy over there is stealing your lunch, just so you know. You're leaving money on the table and I can fix it. Fascinating. Really, Rob? You, the boss who runs the league? It begs the question, what's in it for you? You're doing this out of the just the good of your heart? You think that the players are leaving money on the table and you just want to help them earn their fair share? Something tells me that is not what's going on here. And discussion of something like an economic reform committee that is solely focused on franchise values makes that much clearer as to what the actual purpose of all of this is.
Yeah, because when a sale of a team happens, players don't get any of that money.
No, they don't.
So franchise value is completely divorced from player salary. So the last thing I'll say about this is I'm reminded of what Dave Hill said on this pod, which is that usually the boss is the best organizer of the workers. So Rob can easily say this stuff, but if players came to a bargaining meeting or looked at the history of the transcript or notes from a bargaining meeting, I think you would not see a lot of Rob Manfred being like, we're just trying to get players paid. I think you'd see the MLB side being like, no, nope, we won't do that. No. The only people within a union who think, yes, the boss has my interests at heart more than my union leadership are people who have never actually been to a bargaining meeting. So like if you, not that there's MLB players listening to this, but if you're an MLB player who's starting to feel sweet talked by Rob Manfred, I guarantee you there's a whole track record, or there's a whole group of people who have had firsthand experiences with what it's like to work across the table from Rob Manfred who can tell you that's nonsense. Or just talk to someone who's been through arbitration. It's the same thing. It's all part of the same process. It's all part of the same streams. So I just, of course it's bad faith, but like, unfortunately, bad faith tactics work
Yeah. Right.
like all the time.
That's why you use them.
I don't know. I'm curious. I actually, to bring this all the way back to what you said at the beginning, maybe it's Tony Clark thinks it's not worth it right now to talk about this stuff. I don't see it that way. I actually think that like we're in a moment with labor, but with like the dynamics of institutional power, that people actually want you to call shit out. People don't want you to kind of like move in silence and kind of have this sort of veiled strategy. I actually think if Rob is doing stuff like this, I think it means war. I think that you should come out and, they put out a statement and whatnot, but like, I think you should be out there saying stuff like this that is just as, equally as good faith as his bad faith operation is.
Yeah.
And because I think that rallies the players. I think players want to see, especially like this, machismo that is associated with professional athletes. I think players want to see you standing up to Rob's shit. Rob is not well liked. We can't let him become well liked by players. He is not that. He's not a player. He should not be respected by these players. He has done nothing but hurt them and their constituency over the last 30 years. So I know that deals are not won in the media, but when you have the much more sympathetic side, you do kind of have to use that as an organizing tool sometimes.
Yeah. I believe they call them fighting words. Can we pivot ever so slightly to speaking of bad faith arguments and questionable franchise values and all of the above? We got to talk about the A's and John Fisher.
We are like millimeters away from the A's stadium getting delayed again and getting to check that bingo square off of our bingo card. Yep, millimeters. Like the ball is right there on the 1 yard line. It's fourth and inches.
Obviously, we discussed last week. Yeah, I guess this was last week. The A's initiated their quote unquote groundbreaking on the new Las Vegas stadium. Mere hours, days at most later, stories come out that John Fisher is maybe not so certain on that price tag, which as of last week sat at $1.75 billion. He said to the Las Vegas Review Journal that the latest budgeted amount the stadium will cost to construct is, quote, thereabouts around the $2 billion mark. Love to say my stadium will cost $2 billion or thereabouts. That gives great confidence that the price tag will definitely not go any higher. I'm sure this is the maximum amount that it's going to cost. I will also note that that at the beginning of the season, we brought on our friends from Batting Around. I believe we recorded that on Liberation Day. And we said, are the tariffs going to impact anything? They've got to, right? Baseball's tied up in a global supply chain. Would it surprise you to learn that the first thing they have directly impacted is the A's baseball stadium, with John Fisher saying, yeah, we really don't know. This steel that was coming, all of a sudden, it's getting pretty expensive.
Bro, he's got to call up the Angels, his AL West partner, and start talking to foundation building materials.
Exactly.
So I think an important point of context is that this started at $1.5 billion.
Mm-hmm.
Not long ago, he said the official budget became $1.75 billion because of these increasing costs.
Like 7 months ago.
Yes. Then the quote this past week was, it's looking more like 2. And their commitment as part of the relocation plan, as part of everything that they talked about with the Las Vegas City Council, Fisher supposedly commits $1.4 billion to this project over however long it takes, amortized over however many decades of the loan debt servicing that they are going to be using to fund this. Now, they were approved for $350 million of public funds. And now to cover the gap between that, they are now seeking more money to offset the family stake, which again started at 1.4 billion, but allegedly will have to keep going up as the price of the stadium goes up because they only have 350 million that's approved from Vegas. So we're now running into the exact same situation that we had in Oakland, where the Fisher family has said, here's how much we will pay. There's a cap on how much can come from public funds for whatever reason. In Las Vegas's case, it's because we've approved 350 million. That's it. In California's case, in Oakland's case, it was like, we're just not going to give you anything. I mean, we will help in terms of tax relief for infrastructure updates that you make for something like public transit to a new ballpark, but we're not going to like cut you a check in the way that Vegas did for 350 million. So now I'm supposed to believe, as a consumer of baseball, as an interested party in the A's, I'm supposed to believe that the Fisher family is going to cover that gap somehow. They're going to go out and they're going to find more investors, or they're going to sell Gap stock, or they're going to cut down more trees, whatever they need to do to cover that gap. Here's a question, Alex. Why would I believe that? They didn't want to do it before. They're not going to do it in Sacramento, and they're not going to do it in Las Vegas. The whole reason they're going to Vegas is because they didn't want to pay for the stadium. So now they're going to pay for the stadium?
It's
like, these are the great business minds of our time, Alex. They can't figure out how to build a building and fund it, no matter what it costs. Like, the thing that we've been doing since the beginning of time is building structures for people to be inside. They can't figure out how to do it. They can't figure out how to do it in Oakland. They can't figure out how to do it in Las Vegas, the most corrupt city in human history in this hemisphere. Okay? They can't do it. They can't do it.
Yeah. John Fisher is having to sell a majority stake in the other sports franchise he owns, the San Jose Earthquakes. Supposedly, though these two deals have nothing to do with each other, fat chance.
Yeah.
You're telling me John Fisher is going to net whatever $600 million from that sale, but he doesn't need any of that money. It just happens to coincide with the
550 million number that he needs to offset the Fisher family stake in the Vegas ballpark. Yeah.
It's so funny. Yeah, I mean, it's folks are trying to track how this, capital stack is coming together. Again, like 1.1 billion from the Fishers and like equity. They took out a loan from Goldman Sachs. Aramark has, made some sort of investment of like, I think 125 million or something like that. And they aforementioned public funds, and all of this stuff is still not getting, like, to be clear, they were not getting to 1.75 billion already with all of this. The fact that, we're now $250 million higher does not lend great confidence to the fact that they're going to pull this together. And, as evidenced by the fact that they're courting minority investors. I love this quote from Fisher where he says, "We have the ability to finance this all ourselves. But when we were talking to fellow team owners and the commissioner, it was important to me that we have this opportunity to bring in local investors and other investors. As we've seen with teams all over the country, you have these consortiums of investors who've brought a lot of value." Yeah, like money, like the cash that you are short on. That seems to be the value that you're looking for right now.
Yeah. We have the money to fund this stadium shirt. People asking a lot of questions.
Exactly. Come on.
The other thing is, like, if you can't afford it, sell the team.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't afford to build a place for the team to play, which the last, no joke, 15 years of history supports the fact that you can't build a place for the team to play, I don't think that you should be an owner. I don't believe in these big ownership groups where there's a ton of 1% investors, and no, the owner doesn't control a meaningful enough stake of the team that he can make proper decisions about, I don't know, how much money they should be investing in payroll to have players on the team to be good. That's how you get into situations like what's going on with the A's in the first place, where there's no one who actually wants to cut the check because nobody is invested enough in the team to care about a coherent strategy. It's a bad thing when stuff like this happens. It's a bad thing when stadiums and teams are so funded by the Goldman Sachs of the world that they can't even make independent decisions because they are so leveraged out their ass that they're like, oh my God, I'm sinking my family's Gap empire just to build this AI generated rendering stadium in Las Vegas with Brent Rooker hitting 315. Congratulations to Brent Rooker for bringing it home. This is the type of shit that it's like, well, then what Rob Manfred goes out and talks about the economics of baseball, for me, really just does not hit home. I don't connect with it because you're allowing stuff like this to happen on the other end of the spectrum. It's really cool and fun to talk about increasing the franchise value of the Braves, a team that has run really well, or the Mets, a team that is owned by one of the richest people in professional sports. But then on the other end of the spectrum, it's like, what's going on over there? Not a lot of coherent strategy, boys.
It really doesn't make any sense. Again, it is hilarious that this happened at the same time that they broke ground.
Yep.
They said, we're doing it. We've started the process. Also, the price tag has just increased.
Yeah, that was a $250 million shovel scoop of dirt.
Exactly.
I tell you what, I have yet to be convinced that this is really going to happen. Couldn't you just rip it all up? Like all of these binding agreements, like the price just keeps going up. It's not that, it doesn't seem that binding to me.
Yeah. But also, I don't know. I feel like there's some local momentum there, or at least like will. That God, I really am of two minds. Because on the one hand, I agree that it's like this is only gonna keep getting harder from here. And on the other hand, there is a certain element of like saving face that I think both Manfred and the city of Las Vegas are interested in pursuing right now.
Yes.
Right? To have the ballpark deal fall apart at this point would be a massive stain on Manfred's legacy.
Well,
and
I think that
cannot
if the
imagine he's
ballpark
interested in
deal,
that.
I think if the ballpark deal fell apart, they would contract the A's.
Probably.
I don't think that they would send them back to Oakland. I don't think that they would keep them in Sacramento. I think if it fell apart at this point, Manfred would just be like, time to cut our losses.
I agree, but that feels like, worse than the worst case scenario
Agreed.
in the league's mind. And so they may drag, Fisher kicking and screaming to building this ballpark,
I mean, part of me is like, I think that okay. One of three things will happen in my mind. John Fisher changes his mind about what it means to be an owner of a baseball team and starts cutting real checks to get this done, to cover the gap. That's possibility A. Now, you listener at home, you think in your mind how likely it is that John Fisher is like, sure, I'll just keep writing checks. Okay. Possibility B. Scenario B. The deal falls through. They contract the A's, like I just said. Scenario C. They continue on to Las Vegas. Actually, there's a fourth option. They continue on to Las Vegas, but Fisher, unable to cover the gap of the increasing stadium cost and the debacle that is what's going on. Cover the gap. Mind the gap, John. Has to sell the team to someone else. To another, whatever, the ownership group that it gets involved in the future NBA Vegas franchise. But, the Adelman family who owns the Mavericks but actually made their money in Las Vegas casinos. Something like that. And then, of course, there's a fourth scenario, which is sort of a Hail Mary thing that everyone's talking about, which is like, the A's get sold to Larry Ellison and they bring them back to the Bay Area. But that's like, that's pipe dream stuff. Then that's not really, we should probably let that one go. Mm-hmm. But I suppose if we're talking about contraction, then we should talk about the best case scenario too, then. Those are the four options. There's nothing else. There's no other that I don't think that the Las Vegas City Council is going to be like, actually, we'll double our investment.
No,
not
at all.
That's not politically tenable. I don't think Manfred's going to come in and be like, we'll give you $400 million. Sure. Bank of Rob, loan from the Bank of Rob.
No, I mean, and maybe this is putting too much faith in Rob Manfred, but like at a certain point, it falls on him to say, "Look, JJF,
Straight talk time.
straight talk, right? Let's go 10 toes down right now."
Rob Manfred's wearing like baggy jean shorts. Like he has one AirPod in and he has like the Gen Z undercut and he's like, "It's time to get real, Rob. 10 toes down. Let's get real, John.
Horrifying
10 toes
image.
down."
We've given you a lot of leeway over the last 5, 6, 7, 10 years. It's time for you to hold up your end of the bargain. Like, it's not like he doesn't have any money. He may not want to sell even more of his Gap stock, but at a certain point, you do still own the baseball team. It still does kind of fall to you to be some sort of steward.
Right. When a bill gets sent to A's, it has your name on it.
Yes.
You're the owner.
It would be so embarrassing for things to fall apart at this point. And I don't see a sale happening. Like, barring something drastic happening, like Gap stock cratering or whatever.
We can all do our part.
Let's do it. Can we short sell the Gap stock? I think we can.
Like, yes. I think if we make our case to Wall Street Bets, I think we could do it.
I think so too. But this is probably the lowest valuation point if you are trying to sell the A's. Like, they are playing in a minor league baseball stadium and don't have financing for their new ballpark. Like, you're getting pennies on the dollar for that thing.
When you put it that way. You know what that sounds like?
What?
That sounds like an arbitrage for the guy who buys it.
That's right.
So here's an idea for you,
mm-hmm.
Mr. Ellison. Whoever else. Dagby Dolby. Remember her? She was one of the people who we thought should buy the A's. Dagmar. I think it was Dagmar. I don't remember her name. The Dolby family.
Right.
Whoever else we landed on. Whoever else wants to buy the A's. Whoever else is interested in owning a baseball team and being a savior. Bringing the team back to Oakland. Step 1, get all your finance bros in a room and short Gap stock.
Yep.
Step 2, buy the A's. Step 3, profit.
Doable and really easy. We've laid out the roadmap right here.
You figure it out.
Anyone who wants to bring us in as consultants, we do charge less than McKinsey.
Just slightly, though.
More than Bain, though. So
yes. Okay. What do you want to talk about next? There's the Luis Ortiz gambling investigation. There's MLB and ESPN renewing talks.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I don't have a ton to say on either of these because they, tread a lot of the same ground that we have discussed before. I suppose we can touch on MLB and ESPN. A couple months ago, that we had the news that came out that there were 3 potential suitors that MLB was in talks with for their ESPN replacement. That was Apple TV, Comcast, and an unnamed third suitor.
Mm-hmm.
We have now learned that third suitor was ESPN, I guess.
Fuck. All this time we wanted people to think that it was Tipping Pitches Media.
After 6 months of saying we are never, ever getting back together, here they are. They just can't quit each other.
They benefited it, dude. This is silly. This is all really silly. Nobody wants this. Nobody likes the ESPN coverage. It doesn't seem like ESPN even wants to be covering baseball.
Yeah.
But MLB must, practice the art of the deal, I suppose, and keep all these fires stoked, keep everyone coming back, thinking that they might get it still. I suppose you could make the argument if you wanted a silver lining to this, that ESPN coming back to the table, which leads you to believe that they've decided that they need live sports to continue to fill airtime as part of their new restructuring, where they're focusing a lot more on their like over the top platform, ESPN digital, whatever it's called. I actually don't remember the name of it, but it's like cord cut ESPN. You can get the channel just by paying for it as a streaming service.
Mm-hmm.
I think they think that there might be some strategic upside to keeping things not disrupted, you know, where like if there was a cohort of baseball fans who were like, oh, I like baseball, I watch ESPN from time to time and see a baseball game, or I see the All-Star game or whatever, and now I need to be convinced to pay for a streaming service. Does it have baseball? If no, then I'm not going to pay for it. If yes, maybe. So they might be triangulating those different viewers. And so maybe as part of this renewal, they might actually have a renewed sense of investment in actually broadcasting the sport. And they might say, hey, we're going to change the people involved in it. We're going to change our strategy. We're going to get new announcers or whatever. But I don't know. It's been a while since I watched an MLB game on ESPN and thought it was worth watching. Honestly, I'm not trying to be mean, but just like I can think of better things to do on a Sunday evening.
Yeah, I mean, it is really interesting because Manfred essentially spent weeks, months trashing ESPN as a partner for Major League Baseball, right? Basically saying we're not super happy with the coverage that they're giving us. Folks cutting cable subscriptions and all this is not helping us either. And they're just not really the right partner for us, right? That was kind of the narrative in the off season as the two went their separate ways. And Rob has spent most of this season basically being like, I fucked that up. That was not a good idea of me. I really backed myself into a corner with that one. So I guess I'm not too altogether surprised that they have rekindled these discussions because, again, you have an institutional partner there. At the very least, you kind of know what you're going to get with ESPN. I think that's, probably from Manfred's perspective. It maybe makes sense to not completely write off the worldwide leader in sports from your national media negotiations.
That only does sports, that needs sports beyond all other things, that may be more desperate to pay more for your sport.
Right. Yes.
And at least drive up the
you
price.
Could go
even
to
if you
Apple
ultimately
TV
want to go. Yeah, exactly. Even if you ultimately want to go somewhere else, keeping them in the mix always felt like the right thing to do. I thought it was kind of baller when he was like, you guys suck at covering our sport. We don't want to be in partnership with you.
It was awesome. So I don't know. I suppose part of this maybe felt inevitable. Rob had said he wanted to get this all sorted out basically by the All-Star break, which, hey, we're recording this on July 6th. It's the All-Star break, baby. So I don't know. I'm not super optimistic. I think, with this sort of self-imposed deadline he's put in, he's chucking up shots from wherever he can get them off. But we'll see. As I said on a 3 Up, 3 Down a couple weeks ago, I really would just like them to figure this out. Mostly because I'm so tired of talking about it week after week.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Look out for me, the little guy, Rob.
That's what he's been saying he wants to do. Look out for the little player. Look out for the leader of the MLB Fans Union. Mm-hmm. These are things he cares about. Okay, one final thing. Guardians pitcher Luis Ortiz has been placed on paid leave while he is being investigated for 2 pitches that had what is being described as unusually high betting patterns on these 2 pitches. Basically, okay, here's the skinny on this situation. You can bet on whether a first pitch of a game is going to be a ball or a strike. This is a prop bet that you can make I think that's ripe.
Not
for
even the first pitch of the
exploitation.
game, on pretty much any pitch throughout the game.
They are known as micro bets. Yes, but a common one is the first pitch of an inning or the first
Yes,
pitch of a
yeah.
game. And if you were going to rig it, that would be the easiest one to rig, because what's starting in a 1-0 count, especially in today's day and age where no one knows where the ball is going anyway. It's not out of the question that someone might not throw a strike for the first pitch of the game or an inning or whatever. There was unusual gambling activity a lot. In a gambler's mind, this is a silly thing to place a lot of money on. Now, there might be a sort of arbitrage opportunity if you feel like you second arbitrage reference. Nice. If you feel like there is sort of a gap in the odds, but you don't get good odds on this. You have to pay. You don't get positive odds on ball or strike because it's not really a good thing. It's not really a thing that the gambling company, the casino, the app, or whatever can meaningfully predict pitch to pitch. So they're not going to offer something where it's like free money for the gambler.
Yeah.
So you have to pay a lot to make a lot on something like this. And paying a lot on one pitch is a bad idea. So if you have a ton of money coming in on one pitch, triggers something. It triggers a warning. It triggers a flag. This might be suspicious. And this happened twice with Luis Ortiz. So they are investigating 2 different pitches. One is a slider that was way outside at the beginning of an inning, and another is a slider that he spiked like 54 feet. They're the furthest pitches from the strike zone that he has thrown this year. This is the circumstantial evidence. I have no idea. I don't know. I just renew my opinion that we've let it all go. we've let it all go. There can be no integrity guaranteed when you've allowed this much money to come in and potentially manipulate outcomes within your sport. That is my take. That continues to be my take. It has been my take. It doesn't look good. The video of these pitches does not look good. But who knows? Who knows? Maybe he was an unwitting participant in this somehow. I'm not sure.
But I think that's frankly the right and maybe only question that feels relevant here, right? Is who knows? That's it. That's a problem if people are thinking that about your sport. Who knows if he was up on the take or not? Who knows if he was trying to throw the game with that pitch or that swing or whatever?
Yes, there's a whole spectrum of potential complicity here. Like on one end of the spectrum, he is not involved in this at all. On the other end of the spectrum, it was his idea and he directly profited from it. In the middle, there's a couple different things. There's like, he knew about it. He was blackmailed, or slightly more on the more innocent side of the spectrum. He was told by a analyst or a pitching coach to waste one, and then that trickled all the way down to the gamblers that he was going to be wasting a pitch somehow. There's like a million different potential outcomes.
Yeah. And but I think that uncertainty that is introduced with this is fundamentally a problem for Major League Baseball. And I'm not saying I'm looking out for them, but it's also fundamentally a problem for other folks who would like to bet on baseball as well, if you don't think you can trust the product. So by sort of allowing this to creep into the sport, and with these increasing numbers of players who are getting caught up in this sort of thing, it does not lend confidence to you as a fan, as a, investor, certainly not as a bettor or anything like that. I think that the effects of this sort of thing, even if like the material outcome of the game was not impacted or whatever, is a loss of trust in your sport. And that's a problem, especially as you are at business conferences, investor meetings or whatever, talking about how you're trying to grow the value of your game. These run directly counter to each other.
Agreed. We could close on this, which is that I was at a family barbecue yesterday, and a friend of my cousin's, I was watching the Mets game on my phone, the Subway Series, and a friend of my cousin's walked up and saw that I was watching the game on my phone. First question out of his mouth was not, Are you a Mets fan? Are you a Yankees fan? First question out of his mouth. And granted, he was a little inebriated, so he was kind of letting it rip. He was being rambunctious. First question was, you got money on this game? Like, nah, bro. No. I would never bet on sports, number one, because I think it's far too unpredictable of an outcome, and I am a relatively financially conservative person in my own personal finances.
I've always thought of you as fiscally conservative.
Exactly. And I have far too addictive of a personality to ever get into something like sports betting. Like, you know this. That's number one. Number two, what happened to just being like a sicko for the sport, you know?
Mm-hmm.
We've divorced being a sicko for baseball to now like I have to be a sicko for gambling to ever care enough to put on a baseball game at a 4th of July party. That bums me out kind of, because like that's a kind of stolen valor from the gambling world. Like, I watch every pitch because I'm a freak. I don't watch every pitch because I have money on it. I watch every pitch because I have a mental illness that is being conveyed through the New York Mets. Okay? Get off my turf, gambling people.
No, I actually don't have a literal vested interest in this game outside of like my mental well-being. No, not everything is an opportunity to, I mean, I guess it speaks to a broader like moral rot in society that anything, you know, the poly markets, all this stuff. But it's just like, no, actually, I'm in it quite literally for the love of the game. That's it.
Yep. Or for the hate of the game, or for the pain of the game. I'm just in it, you know?
Exactly.
I've turned over my life out of principle, not out of finance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're not in a great place. Also, again, this is like what happens when you just put the onus on players to police themselves. You know, you surround them with betting advertisements and all this stuff, and then say, okay, you can bet on all the sports except for the one that you play and are intimately involved in every single day of your life.
Yep. Okay, Alex, I know you got to get out of here, and I feel like, you know what? We were pretty on track this whole episode. You know,
we were
no weird tangents about the French Revolution, no weird Zoran tangents, of which there were many possibilities to go down. You tried.
I tried
to bait me in. But... No, I was laser focused, locked in. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We appreciate it. If you like what you heard and you want to hear more, you can head over to patreon.com/tippingpitches, where we are providing 2 extra episodes, currently providing 2 extra episodes every month. During those episodes, we do a little segment called 3 Up, 3 Down. We talk about 3 things that are bringing us joy in the baseball world, 3 things that are taking that joy away. I believe we are due for a Patreon episode this week. So in just a couple of days' time, you can hear another 3 Up, 3 Down, where maybe we'll talk about some of these topics in more depth. If you're already a patron and you're just so compelled by how great the content is, guess what? You can gift a membership to other people. You can say, hey, I love this podcast. I love this Patreon. I think you might like it. I'm going to gift you a membership. So check that out. And if not, just tell a friend. We're putting in the work here every week. We're doing our best. We're trying to sift through the fugue that Rob Manfred tries to create around the state of labor in baseball. We're doing it all just for the love of the game. We don't have a financially vested interest in it. It's all for the love of the game. Thank you for listening. We will talk to you in 1 week.
Hello, everybody. I'm Alex Rodriguez. Tipping pitches.
Tipping pitches.
This is the one that I love the most.
Tipping pitches.
So we'll see you next week. See ya!